The new iRacing GT3 tire update has landed, and it's a big one. It's a substantial shift in how the tires behave, especially when you're flirting with the limits of grip. Let's quickly recap the old tire model problems. The biggest issue has always been the surface flash heating. Under the limit, these cars felt okay, they felt predictable, but the moment you tiptoed outside that razor-thin grip envelope, things went downhill fast. It was like the tires had a panic attack, you push it a little bit too hard, the surface temperature would spike up, the grip would vanish, and the tires would sulk into a corner for half a lap before deciding to work again. Worse still, trying to correct any mistake just made things a little more dramatic. The traction control and ABS would join the party, and it would kill basically any remaining momentum and throwing shade at your driving choices. What this did though was add up to a car that actually drove fine as long as you never stepped out of line. Every sim has its quirks, but iRacing always stood out with a unique trait. It felt like the tarmac was tickling the tires, and GT3 cars are apparently very ticklish. This issue has been around in one way or the other for a while. You can remember people in the past overheating the tires at the start in pit with some cars in order to have more grip, or when people were tweaking the INI files just to create a fake brake dead zone, because even with ABS, braking felt like a tap dancing on a midfield. Or who can forget the legendary moment when top split drivers collectively decided that the fastest way to cool tires at Spa was driving with tires on the grass. These strategies were the representation of a tire model that had the emotional resilience of a damn sponge. The surface heating issue was a prevalent problem, and it was clear that iRacing needed a more robust and practical and actually more predictable tire model that better represented the GT3 cars. So they went back to the drawing board and did quite a few changes, and they have this huge blog post showing the changes, and these are some of the most important points. One of the most important goals in tire development was to reduce tire surface temperature spikes to a reasonable level. This reduced sensitivity to sliding is a significant step forward in our modeling, resulting in tires that are more resilient to short-term sliding and have better post-slide grip recovery. Critically, a spin or an off-track event no longer destroys a tire's grip for the test of a run. The tire spring rates are now closer to those currently used in real life. Compared to the current tires, the vertical rate is softer and the lateral stiffness is higher. This means that the chassis will deflect more under vertical, aerodynamic, and/or banking load. And as well, the tires will start much cooler from the pits, requiring a bit more finesse to avoid spins. Also important is the change in the aerodynamics. You may notice that the cars behave differently in small and large slides. This is partially due to the updated aerodynamic yaw modeling. Different side view body shapes provoke varying degrees of stabilizing side force. Similarly, different complete aerodynamic packages perform better and worse when it comes to downforce and aerodynamic balance. For a lot of you, including myself, it's time to throw out your old setups, and I mean all of them. Every old setup is now obsolete. Not just because the car will feel different in these new tire models and using new physics, but because the setup files themselves no longer align with the updated iRacing format. Oh, and there's also a new rule around splitter height as well. So yeah, it's back to square one for all the setup creators, and I really hope you have kept your spreadsheets. The important part of all of this is, of course, the driving. We can talk about the models and what model is superior, if this is superior or inferior than the other ones, and we can talk about that until the heat death of the universe. This new tire model is designed to make the tires more forgiving at the limit. In theory, that sounds great, but then in practice, it actually holds up. The outlap demands a bit more care, at least for the first half I found. But once the tires come up to a reasonable temperature, grip builds actually quickly. Possibly too quickly, but that's for the experts to decide. You can expect now a few chaotic race starts while people recalibrate their internal warm-up clocks.
You've got wheel damage.
Even though the blog post lists a whole scroll's worth of tweaks for these GT3 tires and also the aerodynamic things, the core iRacing driving feel is very similar. The car is still an iRacing GT3 car. You're not going to suddenly be playing a different sim or Le Mans Ultimate or Assetto Corsa Competizione. Because iRacing is super competitive, how this new model behaves in esports setups or with looser configurations is still a bit of an unknown. If you're curious though, check out Coach Dave Academy's Delta setups, there's a link in the video description. Now back on track, and I do mean literally. The baseline setups still have the usual traits. They have a bit of understeer, a lot of aerodynamic grip, decent stability, and overall solid, easy behavior. Even so, you could push in the past these setups to the limit and then everything would crumble down below the car quite literally because of the grip. But now, the real difference kicks in when you start pushing harder, especially in corners where the conditions aren't perfect, where the camber is loose or there are depressions in the tarmac. Because of it, I think Sebring is a good track to test a new tire model, as there's a good different amount of corners, the tarmac isn't perfect, and driving this track always made me rage before because the tire model always wanted to make me frustrated. There is a really good example in this track for that. It will be the section between hairpin corner to tower corner. Hairpin requires a lot of hard brake and trailing into the corner and going to acceleration fast. However, the conditions are really not perfect there, and it's incredibly easy to spin when accelerating, either because of the brake heating the tires or the inside and outside of the corner are really not perfect. That is been minimized to a point it can be a non-issue unless you really mess up or you go really over the grass. But most importantly, Collier and Tower show how much this changes the game. Collier is a fast, constant radius corner that you want to go flat out in. It's really a wide zone of track. But no matter before if it was baseline or esports meta setup, it was too easy to make the car spin in that section in third or even fourth gear. The car would simply give out the rear because of overheating. Now, it grips fine even when you are pushing the car. Of course, if the conditions change or the tires are degrading, I wouldn't be surprised that in this corner and many similar to this one, you would have to tone down the throttle a little bit, but as it is right now, it is fine. The grip is there, the traction control works properly, or in this case it doesn't really need to do anything, and you do have grip. And lastly, we can talk about tower corner because it has this sneaky little apex dip, and this also feels much improved. And this was a corner that really frustrated me, not because the corner is bad, I love the corner, but previously that depression, if you hit the corner in a certain way, even if you don't go for the curb, that depression would trigger a traction control meltdown thanks to the surface heating. Now, unless you are really trying to provoke the car just goes around, and that's kind of the theme across the board in every track that I've tried. Unless you are really aggressively overdriving or running minimal wing or your tires are in not a good condition, the car behaves more predictably with a much broader safe zone than before. I used to joke that every iRacing GT3 update in the past made it feel more like Assetto Corsa Competizione. But this one, it's arguably the most ACC-esque yet. It's really easy to understand, it's more intuitive, and the tires are definitely easier to drive. Because of it, I understand that the floor of the skill curve is going to be definitely lower, which probably means that the ceiling is higher too. I wouldn't be expected that the top dogs would go even faster. So the result, in my personal note, previously driving GT3s in iRacing felt like a chore to me. Now, even though it's still not my favorite GT3 type of driving, that is still LMU at the moment, I'm actually looking forward to drive more of this. So much so that I'm planning to run a full season starting next week. That alone should say something. Overall, what we have here is a strong update to the tires and a strong update to the driving model, and one that is also nicely timed. There's probably still some more fine-tuning ahead for both the aero and tire models, but as a foundation, this is a solid work, and from there onwards, there's finally, for me, something to look forward to. But let us know what you think in the comments.
You've just set your fastest lap of the session.